So as you can see, I have let me adjust so you can see a little better. You can see that I have my figures kind of organized. They're standing up. You'll also see for these top shelves, I have these, you can see them here, these kind of organizer things. These are spice rack. These I think are bigger than spice racks. I got these at a consignment store. I think these were probably for organizing canned goods. Down here you can see these are the spice racks. I would highly recommend getting the spice racks. You can see that they're a flat surface. It helps your figures stand up, otherwise they get a little wobbly on some of those other ones. So you can see how I have different categories of people. You definitely want to make sure that you get different cultural representations of figures. You can see here I have different cultural figures. I put these on top because kids don't often use these much, and I have different spirituality represented. You can see here we have different spiritual representations, because you want to be able to make sure to have symbols that represent your clients. And then I have some holiday ones here. You'd actually be surprised. Some kids actually, I even had a 7-year-old who used to use a lot of his family was a Christian faith background, and he would actually use the Jesuses. And it was always interesting to me when that happened, because we don't typically think of kids really having a strong faith, and some do. So you do want to make sure you have some of those available. You can see I have some other kinds of people figures. These are more, you want to make sure to have, like I have babies here. Those get used a lot. I have different kind of nurturing. You can see here some of these figures, nurturing figures, and then just kind of regular different kinds of figures here. The people figures you can see here, like these people figures, I don't find a lot of kids or people use those very much. I like to have them, but if you're going to prioritize, I would probably prioritize animals and animal families more so than people, although having the babies is good. Kids use those a lot. The other thing I would prioritize with people is brides and grooms, where you can get these in cake decorating stores, or sometimes Walmart has the brides and grooms. It's nice if you can get them separated, the brides and grooms, like these figures, because then for kids whose parents are divorced, kind of gives you a sense of what they're working through, as opposed to if you have the ones that are together. It's nice to have the options, because when they use, let's say, the separated ones versus the ones that are connected, really gives you more of an idea of what they're processing emotionally. You'll also notice that I do try to get different ethnicity groups with the figures. It's really important to be able to represent each of your clients' ethnicity as well. And then you can also see I have different, I call these miscellaneous symbols, and I have some hearts. Those get used a lot. Definitely want to make sure you have some source of water figures, like you can see the wishing wells and the fountains. Definitely can see in the background I have some fire, and let me show you this one behind this figure. This kind of fire is different symbolic representation than this time sometimes, so it's nice to have different options for each of the kinds of symbols available. When you have the wishing well, think about the symbolism of the wishing well. It's also a well, which is a source of water, which is resiliency. And then we have different kind of figures here as well, which some of the addictions and maybe a little darker sides of the human existence. Also sources of food, resiliency there in terms of nurturing. Food can be nurturing, but we can also use food in an obsessive way, compulsive. So it's interesting to see how the figures are used in the context of where they're placed in the sand tray, what they're paired with. That's why it's important to have different options available. Here you can see some of the Native American figures. I have different, even in this category you can see I have right here, it's kind of a nurturing female with kids, and then we have kind of warriors. Also some of the day-to-day and a source of fire, and then some of their spiritual practices, and the teepee, which is a container house where they live, family. You can see different types of people. I have some of the pioneers, which I live on the West Coast now. I used to live on the East Coast. And on the East Coast, we didn't really focus much on pioneers. We focused mostly on Civil War and Revolutionary War. Out here, I live in the desert, and pioneers are huge. So that's a thing to keep in mind, where your clients' life experiences have been and what symbols they use. And you want to make sure to be able to have some of those options available. The other thing that's really important, if you were going to prioritize in your collection, I would definitely prioritize getting some of the first responders. You can see here I got a little jail. That gets used a ton. If you're working with court-involved youth, it's really important to have some police figures, have a police car, because those get used a lot. Here's, you can see firefighters. We have different kind of firefighter figures. There's one here, it's kind of more nurturing. The other ones are more work-related. Here you can see fire trucks. And then over here, also what's really I would prioritize is construction. Think of the symbolism of construction. Definitely want to have some of the barriers and stop signs. Think about the symbolism of the barriers, protection, but also keeping out, keeping in. Then I also have people figures, just kind of sports and miscellaneous. I have a scuba diver. Think of that symbolism going below the surface, which think about that from the unconscious in the sea. You can also see, want to have different nature elements. Here I have some more kind of whimsical fantasy kind of figures here, and then you can see I have some other more fantasy, other kinds of symbolism for nature. I'm in the desert now, so cactus is more prevalent here. But we also have trees, and it is important to have trees, the vegetation. It's always interesting to see how those are used. It's nice to have different representations of the seasons and have some figures that are, here you can see these trees are more barren. Other trees like winter, the dormancy, change of seasons, evergreens, and then palm trees. It's always, think about the symbolic representation of those. And then here we have some gems. I would definitely recommend getting gems. And you can see I have different kinds and rocks and some shells there. Those are really important to have. And then down here you can see I have more trees and green symbols, miniatures here. And then also you want to make sure to have different kind of elements like, move those. You can see the bridges. Definitely want to have some bridges, some fencing. So I have some the stone fencing, and think about stone material. And then there's some other fencing here that I have in the container. Some scary fencing. It's Halloween. Think about that bridges are transition, so it's always interesting to see how those get used. And I would definitely prioritize getting some fencing and bridges. And at the holidays is a really good time. Like I got these kind of Halloweenish looking ones. If you look in the Halloween villages at some of the craft stores, that's a really good time to get them. Christmas time is another good time. You can get some evergreens and some of the other figures. They have a ton for the villages. So those are times when you can have more availability. And then we have different kind of gazebos here and household figures. And then we have here some fantasy figures. You can see these. It's important, I think, if you're going to prioritize it, be good to have some fantasy figures. And these little fairies, these probably in the craft stores have seen the tubes with lots of figures. Here we have a wizard. Think about the symbolism of the wizard. We have some of the crystal balls and potions and little potion books, a mermaid, another kind of mermaid. So there are two very different symbolic representation of the mermaid there. You can see which is, if they choose one over the other, it gives you a little more insight into what it is that they're focusing on to work through in the moment. Then we have some of the kings and queens and a fairy godmother and prince. Some of the medieval warrior figures with a cannon and some jousting sticks. Then we have, it's also, especially if you work with kids, it's really helpful to get some of their symbolic representation in their movies, like Moana these days is really big. Frozen. There's a Cruella de Vil back there. You can see here, I'll be honest, I hate the fact that these are in containers, but I'm also a pragmatist because I lacked a little storage space. So what I did is I kind of labeled the containers. If possible, I would highly recommend making sure to have these all stand up, because the kids will go right toward looking at them. It'll draw their eye and give more ability to really focus on what they need to work on in that session. So then the other thing you want to make sure to do, and if you were to prioritize, I would definitely prioritize animals, to include sea life. That symbolic representation of the different sea life. Think about lighthouses. Here's a container. So this is open. It'll open. It's nice to be able to have containers that open or close, because you can see more options. Is it open? Is it closed? Is it closed because it's hiding something? Is it closed because it's keeping something locked up? Is there something in there? Is it empty? A lot of times kids will put jewels in treasure boxes. So it's nice to have a treasure box that will open or close. And it's also great to have dinosaurs. So we have a big giant vegetation kind of brontosaurus. And then you can see we have T-Rexes. There's one there with the mouth open. There's a big T-Rex, mouth closed. It's nice to have those options. And you can see I have a little one that's kind of coming out of its shell, so that symbolic representation of new life, breaking forth, vulnerability. Then up here we have, it's also awesome to have nests and some eggs, and if you can, there's one I have where they're all together, but it's nice to have them if they're loose. Different kinds of birds. You could see here there's a road runner, which again, think about even the animals have different cultural significance. Like on the East Coast, we did not see roadrunners there, and here in the desert, I see roadrunners all the time. So it represents different areas of your client's life. Then we have some insects here and some reptiles, tons of creepy spiders, but also some butterflies. And so then there's bugs, we have snakes, those are important to get. Think about the different symbolic representations because you want them to be able to work through. And sometimes we have to work through some different scary things. So it's important to be able to have those figures available. And then different categories of animals. So we have some domestic animals, we have some farm animals. It's nice to have like different kind of representations of the farm animals. So you can see like the pigs, and then we have some playful pigs and then some nurturing pigs. It's always interesting to see how those are used. We have some puppies there and then some more mature dogs there. And also here's some more kind of woodland animals there and more jungle. You can see I have different kinds of monkeys, some kind of playful ones, more kind of nurturing ones there. Here we have like animal families here. It's always interesting to see how they use the animals. Think about it, animals provide a little more psychological distance than people. So if I have animal families, you can kind of see where they're placed in the sand tray. Are they together? Are they apart? Is there danger? Is there nurturing? We look at all those kinds of things. And then we also want to make sure to have some houses and different kinds of houses. You can see there I kind of have a decrepit house. I have spiritual representations and different types of homes. I have some doors there. It's always interesting thing if doors are, and they open, that one opens, this one will open or close. Castles, fortresses, some sand castles, different symbolic representation. Some different cultural representations as well. And yes, that is an outhouse, which I think is hysterical. And you can get these, to be honest, I got most of these houses at a secondhand store, which is a lot of where I got the cultural ones at the secondhand store. People would go on vacation and buy things and then they don't want them anymore, which is perfect for me because then they were really inexpensive. So that, and then finally here we have some more of the people. We have pirates are good to get. Think about the symbolic representation of pirates. We have a treasure box here that'll open and close. We have some caskets and some scary figures. Definitely want to make sure to be able to get some tombstones and some caskets. Really help to work through grief and loss issues. Some scary figures. These, around Halloween time, you can get a ton of these. Then also some more of the fantasy, and you can see some dragons there, and think about the different kinds of dragons. You can see that one's got its mouth open, but then these are little baby dragons coming forth out of their shell. Then you have this dragon on the bones of people trying to steal the treasure. Then we also have different dragons. We have the more Eastern types of dragons and the more Western types of dragons, and then some scary figures, because life is kind of scary sometimes and you want to be able to have those options available: goodness and badness, good versus evil, overcoming evil. And then Tim Burton has some amazing figures to kind of represent really those different kind of broken qualities of ourselves. And I'll tell you, I got this figure at a secondhand store. I have no idea what it is, but it's kind of like bizarre, but it's also nurturing at the same time, which I thought was really cool. There's a wizard there, on a pewter wizard, on a dragon. The other thing to think about is when you're getting your figures, they might get broken. So you want to make sure if you get figures that'll be a little more sturdy, but sometimes they take your figures, the kids will steal them and you don't know. So just be aware, try not to be too emotionally connected to your sand figures because they might end up missing. So I hope you found this video to be helpful and informative, and that concludes the figure video, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.